Hello, everyone. This is going to be David Swinson's virtual author event. We are promptly starting at 6 p.m., but we are just going to hold off for just a few moments while we hope that you've all been eagerly staring at your computer, just waiting for us to get started. But in case you walked across the room or to do dishes or fold laundry or anything else, we'll give you a couple moments to turn your attention this way. And then we'll be getting started momentarily. And I'm just going to pull up it's supposed to be silence for now. So it's just us, but I'm also just going to quickly pull up the link for ordering the book through the store, which I should have done before we are publicly on display. All right, just plugging the buy link into the chat. All right, and so I see a few viewers tuning in. Anyone who misses the start of this will be, I suppose you're not watching now because you'll miss the start of this. It will live on. You'll be able to see the recorded event after the fact. But you know what? It's just going up now. We're relatively new to using not just the virtual events, but to using this particular software where I'm never quite clear what active viewers it's showing me, but it was just ticking up. So we'll give it another moment if you'll be patient with us. And we'll be getting started momentarily with David Swinson's author event with the Mysterious Bookshop.
Wish I could be there. It's so fun being there.
I know. The only good part about these virtual events is that we don't have to set up all the chairs. But otherwise,
and tear them down. I helped tear them down, though.
Yes. You can't say that you didn't pull your weight when you've been here in person. Well, and it is nice that we can welcome people from all over, and that the events also do now live on. So, we've had people who have tuned in internationally, and who have also, watched it a few days after the fact, and then given us feedback and come back to buy the books. Okay, so we're a few minutes past 6. We can get started. Good evening, all. My name is Tom Wickersham from the Mysterious Bookshop, and tonight it's my pleasure to welcome David Swinson for his latest novel, City on the Edge. David Swinson is a retired Washington, D.C. detective. He is the author of 3 previous novels, well, actually technically 4 previous novels, but he is best known for his 3 Frank Marr novels, The Second Girl, Crime Song, and Trigger. And he has, I guess actually the rest of his biography, his official biography, would almost spoil how some of his life experiences may have influenced this novel. So we'll save that for the conversation. So welcome, David.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, and so this was I'm a huge fan of your Frank Marr series, and this is a really interesting departure. And if you don't mind, we can just open by you just providing, it only came out a week ago, and we have copies in the store. We'll soon have signed copies, as I put in the chat. But if you could just take a moment to tell anyone who, maybe isn't familiar with the premise, or maybe certainly hasn't had the chance to read it unless they're a speedy reader, what the book is about.
It's sort of it's been compared. I really didn't mean it to be coming of age or spy. I don't know where spy came from, really. But there's a mystery element. A 12-year-old boy in Beirut, Lebanon in the mid-70s, 73, 74, 72, 73, 74. But I think it's mostly 72, 73. Where this 12-year-old boy is living in Beirut, and his father is a foreign service officer assigned there, and he witnesses something he shouldn't witness, and then that sort of takes over from there. And I was really influenced by Stephen King's The Body, which a lot of people will know is, The Body, but a lot of other people will know is the movie Stand By Me. It was a novella, and I really loved the idea of just this adventure with young boys who end up getting into something they really shouldn't get into. And in Beirut in the 70s, it was a really turbulent time. It was the Civil War, and we were actually, I lived there as a little kid. And, we were actually evacuated in around 1974, 75. So it's sort of an adventure suspense, and I think the spy element that is being compared to in a lot of reviews comes from mostly the father, which is sort of secondhand on his part.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think there's also probably readers and reviewers are probably quick to think of your previous crime novels, and therefore also figure out a way in which this can be labeled a crime novel. And it is, in that it does open with, this is the opening. So even though you were alluding to it, yes, what the boys witness is a murder. And then it's the boy, Graham, is in Beirut because his father works for the United States government, not overtly as an intelligence officer, but it becomes pretty clear as the book goes along that that's what his real job is. Yeah, but I think it's all, it's as much as a spy novel as a, as you said, whether or not that was your intention, really a novel about a young boy who just happens to be entering his teenage years in a very turbulent and strange land to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yes, it's a departure. I mean, but it's reflective. I mean, the voice is a detective looking back, a DC detective. And in a way, it's not semi-autobiographical because, I mean, although it is based on a lot of experiences of mine living there, the family's fiction, the whole, the kid is fiction. But it's very reflective. It's,
Well, you say it's all fiction, and I have no reason to doubt you. Except, of course, there are some very
parts aren't.
there are some very strong autobiographical. As you said, and when your own father worked for the United States government in the Foreign Service, correct? And and your family did live in Beirut around that time. So even if all the details are different, I imagine that was a period of your life, and that was a place that stuck with you to inspire this novel so many years later.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I was a part of what was happening. No, not a part of. I mean, I did witness a lot of what was going on there. I mean, a lot of the bombings, a lot of the shootings, sleeping on the floor, the curfews.
Yeah.
I mean, all that. I mean, the Litany River scene was very real. Mm-hmm. That really happened, but in a different way. I mean, the way it really happened was a little too outrageous to even be fictional. I mean, it was, so I had to sort of try to make it like less, outrageous, the way that scene happened. But that was real. A lot of the stuff, growing up around the reefs off the Corniche in the Mediterranean, and as a little kid prior to the, to the turbulence. I mean, what I like most is, I mean, is I wanted to create this kid that was like me. I mean, very naive, and I mean, my parents really were not around that much, so I mean, I got away with a lot. So I snuck out during curfews and and stuff like that. But I mean, looking back at it now, I mean, it's terrible. I mean, it's terrible what was happening there. But I mean, when you're 12 years old, and you're living there at the time, it's an adventure. And that's sort of what I wanted to create. And I wanted to keep up with the genre I'm in, which I love very much, which is crime fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So I created this murder.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because he's all of the sort of feelings of alienation or transition between being a child to an adult that might be difficult under the best circumstances. He's experiencing while he has fellow expat American friends of his own age. He's still experiencing in a foreign country where he doesn't understand the culture. And as you alluded to, it's a few years away from a massive civil war.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, I wonder, obviously it sounds like actually your experience, you were there closer to the Civil War. I mean, I think it was 1975 than Graham in the book. But did you ever consider these as separate stories? Did you think that you wanted to write a boy of this age or think about writing about Beirut? Or were they just always inextricably linked?
They were always linked. I mean, I was there in 72, prior to the war. So, I mean, I was a little kid running around in, cut off blue jeans, sandals, and no shirt, in a very safe environment, an incredibly safe environment, experiencing uptown and the food and, eating shawarmas and, I still get, deja vu sometimes when I'm like walking somewhere and I get a smell of something, that's phenomenal. I mean, and, walking across the Corniche, which was the avenue that, extended the seawall, at the Mediterranean, and crawling down that to the reefs and snorkeling and spearfishing. I did all that. And then the trouble happened quickly. I often wonder, because my dad was always put in places, that, were destined to fall, and, so that's why I wonder that to this day, I still don't know what he did. And I have an idea that, it was a little more than, Foreign Service officer. But Beirut was an incredible place for me. I mean, even during the turbulence, and in those times, I didn't think of what was happening. Like I said, the death around me. It was a grand adventure, But prior to that, we had much more freedom. During the curfew, I'd sneak out. We had a nanny, and I could easily sneak away from my nanny.
Have you ever revisited Beirut?
I want to so much. Yeah, no, I have not.
Yeah.
And I know that certain places are still standing, like the Phoenician Hotel and the Riviera, which is where we lived. We lived behind the Riviera Hotel. I know a lot of places have fallen and been rebuilt. I know there's a lot of trouble there now. I'm in the middle of writing another book, so I really stay away from the news. But I've heard there's, a lot of turbulence going on there now. There always has been turbulence, in that part of the country.
When you say that, so it's interesting, two things that you alluded to in the book, Graham, the young boy, he is telling the story as an adult. And as you referenced, he himself is telling the story as a police officer. Not necessarily that that's the lens in which it's shown through, but he alludes to that. And in the book, quite explicitly, his father carries a gun, is conducting clandestine meetings, late at night with people who he's keeping Graham apart from. And clearly there is an idea of secrecy and also, potentially secrecy of some sort of, service to the government. And would you say that any of that influenced your own decision to become a police officer in real life? And if, when you say that you suspect that your own father perhaps was, some sort of potentially intelligence officer, not too distant from, say, a detective, if you considered that as how you follow in his footsteps, like Graham might in his book.
I did wind up in intelligence during 911, and I was certainly influenced by my father and my grandfather, who was a deputized ATF agent in the North. I always wanted to, get into law enforcement. I always first off wanted to be a writer, and so I got my degree in film, thinking I'd write screenplays and get into film. And then, as you know, Tom, I don't know if anybody else knows. I mean, I got into the punk rock movement in the '80s and in Long Beach, and then film and stuff like that. So my path really took off in a different way. But I always wanted to be a writer first. And then there came a time in my life where I decided that I really am tired of this independent producer type life. And I really want to get into something that I've always wanted to do, which is law enforcement. So I joined, and I didn't want to go federal because I really didn't want to, the feds, whether you're in, I don't know if I would have ever been accepted, but whether you're in the FBI or the Foreign Service, which is one of the tough things to get into, or any kind of, and Foreign Service is not law enforcement, but you're moved around every 4 years, every 3 to 4 years. I didn't want to be in a position where I was moved around. I wanted my own corner, And Washington, D.C. was always home base, during countries, that I lived in. And I grew up there. I went to high school there, and I loved Washington, D.C. So that's where I applied. And fortunately, despite who I got to know as a punk rock promoter, I mean, I got accepted, and I didn't think I'd stay as long as I did. I wanted to get life experience, and primarily as a writer, and it ended up, 20 years ended up passing like dog years. I mean, it was, incredible. I loved it.
Do you think that part of what made you want to be a writer was the sense of excitement of always moving around as a kid? Or is that something where it felt more, was it more of a burden to constantly be uprooted? Or did you feel like you were seeing these wonderful foreign lands every time your father was restationed?
My father was a huge influence in me wanting to be a writer. He always was into writing. And I mean, Graham came from Graham Greene, because he would read to me as a kid. He'd read The Power and the Glory. He'd read, The Quiet Man. He'd read those to me like bedtime stories.
Quite American.
Yeah, and I got my whole, I'm into Maj Showal Perawaflu, and I'm missing a couple of editions, but all that, because I lived in Stockholm too, and I mean, all that came from my dad, all those police procedurals, the spy stuff, Jean Le Carré, my dad's still alive, fortunately, but he left a lot of his books behind, and a lot of them were those paperbacks from Jean Le Carré and Graham Greene, and the hardcovers of Maj Showal Perawaflu, which I'm missing only 2. Yeah, I'm letting you know that.
Yeah.
I think you know.
I can read between the lines.
I think you know the 2 I'm missing, and
I might have it written down. I'll have to double check.
And I want them.
Now,
so that was a major influence in me. I think as a kid, I always wrote as a kid. I wrote, when I was 17, I wrote my first book. It was 300, I don't know the word count, but it was 389 pages. And I thought when I wrote that, I said, this is it. This is the book to end all books, and I'm going to die, And then I got rejected when I was 18, and it changed everything.
But you did submit it.
Oh, I submit my dad submitted it for me. But
okay.
At that time, and I'm giving up the time. I mean, at that time in the late 70s, it wasn't, you didn't, a lot of the major publishers allowed, unsolicited manuscripts.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said this before on, in other interviews, but I swear I was rejected by Little Brown and Company. And it was a massive rejection. It was like devastating.
Mm-hmm.
And all I know is it was a female editor. And I'm sure if she had known I was 17 when I wrote it, she would have been more kind.
Mm-hmm.
But it destroyed me.
Who are the authors influencing 17-year-old David?
Oh my gosh! I mean, Graham Greene, G.K.
Leon,
Chesterton.
Leon
I'm sorry?
Leon Uris?
Lee who?
Leon.
I'm not here.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
No.
He was sort of the epic novelist of Israel, Exodus.
Oh no, I wish.
And then he did his spy thing. It just seems he was, I would consider him like a Harold Robbins contemporary.
No, I'm not like Harold Robbins.
Well, perhaps it seems like the kind of thing you might have read that.
No, I wish.
Like
although I did read what's that one by that the woman who wrote the Mile High Club. I read that, and that was like when I was 16 or something. I'm going, oh my gosh, this is like, I mean, it's where I experienced. I mean, I shouldn't be reading this kind of stuff. But I was influenced by Perwahu, Ma Showal, and I reread a lot of that stuff, in my 20s, and a lot of the police procedurals, and a lot of the stuff that has nothing to do with police, like C.S. Lewis, but mostly his nonfiction, things like that. And Dickens, Dickens is a huge influence in my life. And then, of course, without a doubt, I mean, Joseph Wambaugh. My dad had, like The Black Marble, and I mean, all this stuff by Joseph Wambaugh, in paperback, and I still have a lot of those in boxes.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say Wambaugh, because I think in the same way when you say that you don't understand how or exactly why people are so eager to label your new book a spy book or an espionage thriller, it's almost a book about the home life of the son of a spy, and the way that type of a family that's constantly on the move and surrounded by uncertainty and secrets might affect the human beings involved, as opposed to assassination plots and all sorts of sneaking people over the border, in a similar way where Wambaugh would write more about the beat cops in their everyday answering of radio calls and what they were doing off hours, as opposed to a detective who is solving some massively complex serial killer case.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, like the Choir Boys, stuff like that. I mean, I before Frank Marr, I mean, I was writing a lot of police procedurals, and I was very influenced by obviously by Pelicanos and by Wambaugh and stuff, and so was writing all these police procedurals, and everyone said, we already have, we have a Wambaugh, we have a Pelicanos, we have everybody, like that, So that's when I decided I'm going to go outside of myself and just write a character that is nothing like me. I mean, he's maybe 15% like me, but I don't do cocaine.
That's the one place where you can get right.
Then I'll give up. But so a character that I'd have a lot of fun with, and fortunately it got into the right hands. Josh Kendall. I mean, he loved it, and we hit off on a still fabulous relationship to this day.
Now, you mentioned that you're working on your next book, and I don't know if you're at a point where you're ready to talk about it publicly, but I guess it's a two-part question. If you are, I'm certainly curious what you're working on, but also, are you tempted to either do a sequel to City on the Edge or return to Frank Marr, or are you have a taste now for standalones and intend to continue experimenting?
Right now, I want to do one more standalone, which takes place in the late 70s, like 80s, late 70s, like 80s, like 87. I'm very influenced by not the books, but the personality of Hunter S. Thompson, and I knew him, back then. So I want to write sort of a PI novel that takes place in that whole punk era in Long Beach, California, which again is based on my experience, with a club there where Hunter was, and Timothy Leary, and the Pixies and the Chili Peppers. I mean, everybody played there and performed there and talked there. And I want to create some sort of punk noir type, crime novel, and sort of get back to that sort of PI like Frank Marr. Now, Frank Marr is someone I definitely want to come back to, but I cannot come back to him in the same way. First person present tense. I think he's done. But I've always seen him coming back with a partner who's introduced in book 1 and book 3, reintroduced, and have it third person with the both of them. So I'm not done with Frank Marr. I mean, if I can get it published, I'd love to come back to him.
The expanded Frank Marr universe, and maybe Graham as a police officer will show up in one scene.
Oh, that'd be cool. I think Graham is a little older as a police officer than Frank, so he would probably be there. He'd probably be retired. Well, no, Frank was retired early, so he would probably know who Frank Marr was, and probably because Frank Marr was infamous, but no one knew of Frank Marr's, sniffing tastes and stuff like that. He was retired silently.
I always liked in at least one of the James Crumleys, he has, he's got his two detectives, Milo and CW, and one of them, the other one shows up to help out or kind of nurse him back to health, but unnamed. However, fans of the series can pick it up, and that may have been because of some sort of like movie rights owning the guy's name or something, legal dispute. But I always like those little nods to the reader when then they were together in a novel. But
yeah. I mean, you asked too if I would bring back like something, a sequel to City on the Edge. No, I mean, I would maybe Graham as a detective. That would be interesting. That'd be fun. What kind of a detective he is, and how he was influenced by his background living in other countries, and stuff like that.
And what kind of unrest his father was seeding in Stockholm?
I don't know. Probably had a lot to do with what was going on in Russia, or I don't know. All I know is there was no American community school in Stockholm, so I had the choice between going to Frankfurt or Mallorca, Spain. And where do you think a 17-year-old kid is going to go? Seriously. A little island on the Mediterranean, with all these, beautiful women, or Frankfurt with this great beer, and drinking. But I could drink underage in Mallorca too, so, but I didn't really spend much time in Stockholm except for in the summers, which was a very dark period. I mean, not dark period in my life, but just it was dark. Mallorca was that's another story. It was my second girlfriend in life. I met there.
David, I just have to say there's probably no way that we can avoid it, but just for if any viewers are noticing, your screens are perfectly reflected in your eyeglasses, so you have sort of uncanny robot eye, which I actually think is in some ways a very authoritative look for you, half writer, half machine.
I can't see without them. I mean,
yes, no, I'm sure you can. Yeah. I was just giving you a heads up because I know you've got a bunch of these coming along, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that look, but I'm curious when you say that your first sort of attempt to be a writer or your first professional pursuit of writing was in film, and do you think cinematically when you work on your books? Do you sort of see do you feel that those skills have carried over into your fiction writing?
Oh, I'm very visual. Yeah. And I also, again, very influenced by, how, like in the Martin Beck series, like how Stockholm was always a backdrop and like a character. So I loved the idea of cities, or, backdrops as just as much as characters as the actual characters. But yeah, I'm very, very visual. So I don't think, cinematically anymore. Screenplays are so formulaic. Well, back when I was writing them, and I actually got one film made, but I wrote the story, and someone else. I was too scared to write the screenplay. Someone else who wrote Sid and Nancy, I hired her to write the screenplay, and it got made. But um, they were really formulaic back then. They're not so formulaic now. They're more. A lot of authors are writing screenplays now,
Yeah,
and they're writing them in their own style, and there's a lot more freedom. I've read some screenplays by authors, and it's not like it used to be.
hmm
Fade in, cut.
yeah. Well, or also television shows that can feel more novelistic in their long form and more novelists. I'm thinking like Pelicanos being involved in writing long, complex television shows where you have a little more room to tell
Mhm.
a more involved story without feeling like you've got to adhere to any sort of strict format.
Yeah, very. The Mars series was really always compared to the one of the biggest comparisons was to The Wire, which to me is a
Yeah.
freaking incredible compliment.
And now, is there any news on that front? I know people have tried to buy the rights or develop it at
To
different.
adapt it, yeah, it just there's interest. It's still there. Second Girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know yet what's going on with City on the Edge. But it's a very difficult, the, you know, character.
Yeah.
And it was like originally, I had the rights to Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas with
Oh,
with Layla Nabulsi. She had the actual rights, but I was helping her get it made. And that was very difficult at the time too,
mhm.
because in Naked Lunch, because of the failure of Naked Lunch, and and just the whole drug theme and stuff like that. But she finally, believe it or not, when I was in the academy, she got Johnny Depp attached, and it got made. That was incredible. And now, I'm sort of, there's still a lot of, that Doctor series where he's a cocaine addict. I don't know. It's with that actor I like. I don't remember the name of it. But
Nick, the historical one.
yes, yeah. And there's a lot of other ones, but Frank Marr is a difficult character. So there have been a lot of actors that have tried to attach themselves to it, and it just, never. So far it hasn't happened. I'd love to see it happen. I'd love to see it as a series.
No, I think it would be terrific. There's of all the uh, there are moments in those books that are extremely memorable set pieces. I'm thinking in River and in the drug house with the grandmother and many others that,
Oh my gosh.
yes, would be extremely memorable if they were committed to the screen. So,
Yeah, it'd be a little bit much.
well,
That whole grandmother scene, in
I
Crime Song is just.
I think people would be talking. So,
But I've been in search warrants like that where I've actually
mhm,
experienced that.
yeah,
And that's not taken from any search warrant in particular, but
yeah.
where obviously I don't do that. It's all just experiences. So if I've experienced it, I'm gonna write around it somehow.
hmm Do you do that, both when you refer to the autobiographical elements in City on the Edge and also in the Frank Marr novels? Is some of that just as an exercise as a novelist where you only want to take a certain amount of your real life experience, or is some of it also whether it's still living people or just ethically that you wouldn't feel comfortable writing about what you've actually experienced, whether it's the personal relationships or potentially even legal repercussions or say the privacy of people you interacted with as a police officer?
Yeah, no, I won't write about that. It's totally based on experiences. I'm not, although, well, with the City on the Edge, I really didn't have to do any research except for looking at photographs in my yearbook and stuff like that. I'm not a research author, which I like. I'm so impressed with those authors that can. I can't research. I'm terrible. I'm terrible at it. I have to write based on experience. I mean, the Frank Marr series, the research I did was going on the occasional ride along with a cop friend just to re-experience, the feeling, or go sit at 17th and Euclid, which has totally changed. But to sit there, in my car and, act like I'm surveilling, and just watch, and just drive around DC, which has really, really changed so much. So that's really the only kind of research I do is just to refamiliarize myself with locations and things like that. And with drugs change. They were called dippers. I don't know what they're called now. Maybe it's still dippers. PCP and water and I mean all these things. So there's certain things I have to research, and basically I call a friend, and say, hey, what is the popular drug on the street now, or is this still called this, or something like that.
You call your PCP friend?
My PCP friend down there. I don't know whether they're alive or not.
Did you do any research for City on the Edge? I mean, it sounds like if I understand if you don't feel in a position to discuss the intricacies of Lebanese politics, and I certainly couldn't either. But when you say that you're not following the news daily, did you look on Google Maps or anything, or try and find historical photographs? Did you
timeline? Mm-hmm. I just wanted to make sure the timeline was right.
Yeah.
And that my recollection of the timeline was accurate, because I'm thinking we were evacuated in 75, and it very well could have been 74, so I don't know. And my dad's still alive, and he doesn't even remember really, he was, we went out very similarly to the way they were evacuated, via car. But I just, the timeline with respect to the politics was the only thing I wanted to make sure was accurate.
Has anyone who was either who you knew at the time or who you've met since who's been to Beirut read the book and commented on it?
I'm friends with a lot of ACS, American Community School friends, on Facebook, and I did go to a couple of friends and post on ask them on their timeline, hey, does anybody remember, did we really sleep on the floor, or am I just like imagining that as like some adventure? And they go, oh my gosh, yeah, we slept on the floor all the time, and the ones that were in the that didn't have parents there, that were in the dormitories, they snuck out even more than we did. So there was a lot I learned from a lot of friends on Facebook who was there at the time.
I'm curious if it was just the timeline, or it's interesting when you talk about if it's just a timeline of that's when you knew Beirut, or when you talk about your early aspirations as a novelist and all of these experiences you've lived, where you say that you wanted to keep writing crime fiction, it sounds like you want to go back to adult characters. But if you'd ever write another book about a child, since your childhood seems like it was, incredibly full of all sorts of diverse experiences, literally traveling the world, that not a lot of people experience.
I would definitely love to write about another child, not Graham. It'd sort of be weird, having Graham get involved in all these incredible adventures, like in Mexico City and Mallorca and Spain and, places like that, just like, and always surviving, I'm a realist, I try to get it as real as possible, but I would love to have another young character, a teenage sleuth, where it would actually be more, getting involved in solving the mystery, and more of a danger element to the crime for the kid. That wasn't, I don't want to give anything up, but I mean this thing sort of solved itself,
I think that's part of what's interesting about the book is it is a murder mystery. There are espionage elements, and Graham is front and center for both the crime and a lot of the surrounding violence and adventure, but it doesn't feel artificial where he is somehow a superhero. He's very much a child in sort of this adult world sort of swirling around him that he's trying to comprehend.
He was an observer, and I very much wanted him to be, a crime solver. And, how books, just sort of, with me, when I get past a certain point, they sort of write themselves. And that just didn't happen. It just didn't feel accurate. It didn't feel right.
So if anyone who is watching has a question, you can type it in the comments field on the right. So far, our one question is...
Has she been to Ibiza?
Yes, well, just exclamation marks. Sometimes we don't have a lot of audience questions, but you certainly have the opportunity to chime in, and we'll put them on the screen, or I'm happy to keep talking to David. I will say, while anyone thinks of a question, when I asked about your earlier influences, I wonder if there's anything current or older that you're enjoying reading or watching now.
Ryan Gass's System blew me away. I mean, absolutely blew me away. The authenticity, and then Jonathan Ames' book, A Man Named Doll, was another one, blew me away.
Both people we did author events with.
Yeah. And I had the great opportunity of talking, being in conversation with Ryan, and I'm a huge fan of his, and that's just a book, as a former cop, you want, like Pelicanos always gets it right, I mean, the city and everything else, and he embeds himself in with the police, and, he gets it right. And Ryan got it right. I can't recommend it more. I mean, highly, The System. It's really, really good. And, Joe Ide, I mean, I love Joe's work. He's a good friend.
As a former police officer who wrote about a cop who is not, and a former cop who's not without redeeming qualities, but is a bad cop. So often when there are, I'd say, police novels, they're rarely about, sometimes there is, a police detective who is a hero, but a lot of times the books that are sort of touted as getting it right or being sort of true and gritty, exposed, sometimes a very sort of sinister or certainly not by the books approach to policing. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, and if there are books you can think of that have given an accurate depiction of, because I imagine you were a very conscientious police officer on the job, because it's of course, a world where you would encounter all kinds of disturbing events and behavior, but then there's got to also be, I guess a police officer who's just working, you know, off duty at a club and then monitoring construction sites during the day or whatever would hardly be great drama. But I wonder if there is a sort of less salacious side of policing that you've ever seen depicted well in fiction, or if you just sort of have any thoughts about the stories of police that do make it, to film, television, and novels.
I mean, a lot of them are, cop writers. I mean, Bruce Coffin,
Yeah.
his work, oh my gosh, you're putting me on the spot, because I mean, I've got so many friends that are authors that are just doing an incredible job, and even non-cops, that are just getting it right, I'm really being put on the spot, because I'm going brain dead as far as names, but there are a lot of new and current, very established writers that, in my opinion, are doing an incredible job of getting it right. I don't like writers that, and I'm sure that, the couple of these writers that I'm not going to mention their names, but, we'll know who they are if they were listening, but I'm sure they're not listening, where they put quadrants, like in DC, we have, 4 quadrants, northeast, southeast, northwest, northeast, when they put southeast in the northwest or something like that, clearly don't know what they're writing about. They've never been there, and stuff like that. That drives me absolutely crazy, and on television too, I mean, I can't, and films,
Yeah.
I'm one of those guys who just, says, yeah, that's not how it happens. I mean, that's, it drives me nuts. So when they get it right, I love it.
Yeah. Would you consider, so you were saying that you're, I guess, I'm not sure if this is the next novel you're working on now or a future project that you're contemplating, but your sort of punk scene California novel, are you again thinking of writing that as a period piece in the time when you knew it? Yeah.
And a PI, clearly very much a PI, nothing like, City on the Edge or anything. It'll be, mushrooms, cocaine,
Mm-hmm.
ecstasy,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the stuff that was popular back then. I mean, the drug culture really, I mean, that's what I worked. I worked high intensity drug trafficking area. So, I mean, I do know, drugs. So, I mean, I'm not saying I'm impressed by it or anything like that, but I mean, I do like to incorporate that whole scene into my writing, and I want to bring that back, but in like a time that was really important to me in 1987, when 86, 87, like when you had, when I was introduced to people like Hunter S. Thompson and Timothy Leary, and a lot of bands that were like, but they're just like in the background. They're not a part of the book, but it'll be like a murder mystery.
After when Graham's father, with the help of Timothy Leary, LSD into the
legally, can I'm trying to think. Can I bring Hunter S. Thompson? Because I've got some recorded stuff. I mean, can I bring him actually into the book? I mean. I'm looking into that, because and Timothy Leary and G. Gordon Liddy and a lot of he wasn't counterculture, but some real counterculture figures like Jim Carroll and people like that, and a lot of the bands, Social Distortion and Throwing Muses and Nick Cave, who was like I idolize, and had a conversation with Ed Bogarts on one occasion. It was 5 minutes, but it feels like it was an hour. Can I bring them in? I'd love to be able to bring them in, with this, because this guy's going to be a doorman, slash PI, because he can't make enough, at that time, in that location as a PI. So he's also a doorman, backstage doorman at this club. And then something happens, and he's called upon by one of the, alternative music fans, and the police aren't really paying much attention to what happened. So he's called upon to help. I really love the idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, now that I think of it, I do remember, I don't know exactly when or who, but someone putting out the call, are there any sort of punk rock noir? It almost sort of seems like it's skipped after the 70s wave of, Crumley, and then some lesser known today like Arthur and Lyons, and then you had sort of the early 90s when you had Lahane and Pelicanos and Mosley were historical, but there does seem like a really great territory, especially for the classic California private detective.
Yeah, well, the Canadian author I can never pronounce his last name. Caltelis.
I know who you're talking about, maybe because you mentioned them to me. I can picture the book, the green paperback, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about,
He did it very well. And, with the Canadian scene going into the, Southern California scene. And, it was very, very much punk noir.
I was just seeing if I have my book down here. Disco's Out, Murder's In.
That's cool.
That was it's a nonfiction book about someone who was part of the punk gangs in Los Angeles in the 80s.
Punk gangs.
I'll have to get you a copy.
Huh. Yeah.
Well, again, I'm happy to keep asking David questions about his writing and movies and books, but we welcome any questions if anyone does want to chime in. And I'm curious, when you said, I think that you're a fan of Father Brown, but I know that you like Chesterton writing beyond that. And since we've mostly been discussing genre, I wonder what do you like that's far removed from sort of crime, espionage. If there's anything you're actively reading for pleasure or old childhood favorites that influenced you that, couldn't be, perhaps influence your work, but aren't superficially aligned with it.
I mean, G.K. Chesterton can get really out there, Man Called Thursday. Is that the right title?
I only read anything.
And then a book I found at your place, The Poet and the Poets and the Lunatic. I mean, he can get really far out, but I enjoy mostly his nonfiction. A lot of the the theological writings, that he does, orthodoxy and same with C.S. Lewis. Like, I wasn't really a Narnia fan or anything like that, but I loved like, The Problem of Pain and, Mere Christianity. And, I mean, a lot of those books, believe it or not, really inspire me, especially A Problem of Pain, because he gets so much into the pain of human existence, even animal pain, and so that's what I go back to when I want to be influenced. And when I really, really want to, if I'm really losing my edge, I'll always go back to reading To Kill a Mockingbird, stuff like that. So a lot of the stuff I read is, going back to stuff I've read over and over again, Dickens, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Not trying to compare myself at all to any of those authors. I can't. I mean, there's no way. I mean, I wish I could write a To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, that would be, phenomenal. That's a book that, broke every genre out there, I mean, it was everything, It was drama. It was court. It was, crime. It was everything. Playa de Palma. Lou Archer rules. Yeah, well, I've been to Playa de Palma.
Well,
I was just reading comments.
Yes. If we didn't get questions, we got some excellent comments about fun geographical locales for David to revisit in future novels. And don't forget, City on the Edge, out now. We're shipping copies to David, who will sign them, and we'll have signed copies available in the store. But if you're just itching to read it right now and don't care about having a signed first edition, you can come in, and we've got books on the front table. Thank you all for joining us. If you missed the start of this interview, it'll be available wherever you're watching it. Currently, it's on YouTube and Facebook. And David, any final words?
No, I appreciate. I'm curious if I know this person who's from. It looks like she's from Playa del Palma or de Palma in Mallorca. If that's where she's from. But no, I have.
Your second girlfriend?
No, I seriously. No, that'd be weird. That'd be very weird. But no, I appreciate being here. Thank you very much.
Well, it was a real pleasure. I've enjoyed all of your previous novels, and I think that anyone who's read the Frank Marr books will be very satisfied with this. It certainly has lots of great thriller elements and the wonderful prose that we expect from you, but it's also a real departure, and it was a great and rewarding surprise.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for being here.
And we look forward to your next novel about the CIA strategy of psychedelic tension.
Yeah, actually could bring that in with Timothy Leary and the whole CIA and the, and that kind of thing. But no, I don't think I'll go there.
All right. Well, thank you, David. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and good night. And we'll hopefully see you all at our next event.